Concern over the tragic effects of the new sedative thalidomide prompts President Kennedy at his press conference to call for stronger, better administered drug laws. He announces a staff increase for the FDA, whose Dr. Francis Kelsey kept it off the United States market. Asked about other safeguards, he replies,
The Food and Drug Administration have had nearly 200 people working on this. Every doctor, every hospital, every nurse have been notified. Every woman in this country, I think, must be aware that it's most important that they check their medicine cabinet and that they do not take this drug, that they turn it in. Every citizen, of course, should be aware of the hazards, and I'm sure they are. Now what we have to concern ourselves about is the first appreciation to Dr. Kelsey, who spared us this terrible human tragedy which has been visited on families in Germany, and to provide both administrative and legislative safeguards to lessen the chance of such action coming in this country again.
That was a clip from a press conference given by President Kennedy in 1962, and the drug he is referencing is called thalidomide. The rejection of thalidomide was a landmark case for the FDA and U.S. drug regulations, mostly thanks to one woman, Dr. Frances Oldham Kelsey. Kelsey was a medical reviewer for the FDA, but she almost never even made it to graduate school. After completing a master's in pharmacology at McGill University, Dr. Kelsey applied for a doctorate position at the University of Chicago, which she received. However, her acceptance letter was addressed to Mr. Oldham, and she, quote, knew men were the preferred commodity in those days, end quote. She wasn't sure if she should write back explaining her gender, but her master's supervisor reportedly said, quote, don't be ridiculous. Accept the job, sign your name, put Miss in brackets afterwards, and go, end quote. Kelsey writes, to this day, I do not know if my name had been Elizabeth or Mary Jane, whether I would have gotten that first big step up. While Dr. Kelsey was working towards her PhD at the University of Chicago, thalidomide was wreaking havoc in Europe. Thalidomide was discovered in 1953 by the German pharmaceutical company Chemie Grunenthal. It was originally discovered as a sedative because it was an analog to another sedative, glutathione. Further research found it was also an effective antiemetic. That is, it inhibited nausea and vomiting. However, as was the norm at the time, it was only tested on rats and self-tested by the researchers, all of whom were men. It was most certainly not tested on pregnant women. Thalidomide hit the market in West Germany under the name Contergan, and soon became known as an effective over-the-counter morning sickness medication. It then began to be manufactured in the UK by the Distillers Company under the name Distaval. Distaval was marketed as a morning sickness remedy in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, with the ad copy, quote, Distaval can be given with complete safety to pregnant women and nursing mothers without adverse effects on the child, end quote. This is a blatant lie. Within a year of the drug hitting the German market, reports from pregnant mothers of children with limb abnormalities, facial palsies, and even miscarriages began to stream in.
He said the other day, he was pretending to be his father, you see, and he said, I'm Peter Nielsen, and I've got 3 sons. And I said, oh yes, and what are their names? And he said, well, one is Mark, and he teases, and one is Carl, and he cries, and one is Brett, and he's got no arms.
Brett was born in Australia 4.5 years ago. Now he lives in London, where his father works as an engineer. He and his brothers are perfectly healthy, and so are his parents. There is no history of illness or handicap in the family. Brett was born without arms because when his mother was pregnant, she was given tranquilizing pills containing thalidomide. She was one of 10,000 mothers all over the world who had the same experience.
Thalidomide's effect on pregnant women is because companies were manufacturing and selling it as an enantiomer mixture. Molecules with the same atom-to-atom connectivity but different 3D shapes are called stereoisomers, and molecules with the same atom-to-atom connectivity but which are non-superimposable mirror images are a type of stereoisomer called enantiomers. Thalidomide is not one pure molecule, but a mixture of 2 enantiomers. Biological receptors bind molecules based on their 3D shape, and because enantiomers like thalidomide have a different 3D shape, they bind differently to the same receptor. Picture a left hand trying to fit into a right-handed baseball glove. Because enantiomers bind differently to the same receptor, enantiomers act differently within the body. Enantiomers are chiral, which is an adjective describing the property of having a non-superimposable mirror image. Going back to the baseball glove example, try putting your hands on top of each other. The thumbs won't line up because hands are also chiral. However, despite their chirality causing them to act differently in the body, the same atom-to-atom connectivity of enantiomers mean they have the same boiling point, melting point, and solubilities as each other, making them really hard to separate or resolve. This is a problem when it comes to drug manufacturing. The original manufacturing method of thalidomide resulted in a 69% yield of the desired anti-nausea R enantiomer of thalidomide and a 31% yield of the birth defect-causing S enantiomer of thalidomide. In the U.S., representatives for the original German manufacturer of thalidomide, Chemie Grunenthal, made a deal with the U.S. drug company Merrill to market and distribute thalidomide in the U.S. The FDA official in charge of Merrill's approval review was Dr. Francis Oldham Kelsey. Merrill's application focused on physician testimonials and included no quantitative results from clinical trials. Dr. Kelsey is quoted as saying, "I had a feeling throughout the day that they were at no time being wholly frank with me, and that this attitude has obtained in all our conferences, etc., regarding this drug." Dr. Kelsey was obviously suspicious, so she did her own investigating and soon found the reports of birth defects and nerve damage caused by thalidomide use in Europe. After 6 separate complaints from Merrill to her supervisors, Kelsey officially rejected thalidomide with agency support. Despite the FDA's rejection, some American babies were still born with thalidomide-caused defects, as even before its approval, it was passed from Merrill to doctors to patients with little acknowledgement of the fact that it was indeed experimental. According to one partially censored document from the FDA, Dr. Blank continued to administer the medication to his wife until the middle of July, and his wife's loss of vision still persists. This was dated before the drug was even approved. President Kennedy awarded Dr. Kelsey the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal in 1962 for her work on thalidomide, and Dr. Kelsey later served on the FDA committee that implemented the now standard 3-phase trial process required for human drugs to be approved by the FDA. These new guidelines were the first in America to require drugs to be both safe and effective, to require adverse reactions to be reported to the FDA, and to require informed consent from patients in medical trials. In one of the only known recordings of her, Dr. Kelsey herself speaks of this and says,
"The havoc wrought by this led to the 1962 amendments of the law, and one of these required that before a drug could be marketed, it had to be shown not only safe, but effective for the purpose or purposes it was proposed for."
Although the story seems to have a happy ending, Big Pharma is still alive and well. The original German manufacturer of thalidomide, Chemie Grunenthal, historically attributed the reports of defects to causes like nuclear fallout and botched home abortions, including in court cases. They did not officially apologize to the victims of thalidomide until 2012. Additionally, despite the new and more stringent guidelines for drug approval by the FDA as a result of the thalidomide crisis, the aggressive use of non-evidence-based marketing practices by pharmaceutical companies still occurs. For more on this, I suggest watching The Pharmacist, a documentary series about one man's experience with the origins of the prescription opioid epidemic. As that series demonstrates, thalidomide is only one example of how, as chemists, it's important that we're ethically accountable to those we serve. As always, thanks for listening.